This question comes up so often from caregivers of people who are chronically or terminally ill. It's about balancing helping with allowing space for autonomy. I'm a physician and an ethicist. I teach in Geneva. I'm an ethics consultant in the Geneva University hospitals. And this is a very, very frequent issue. Because if you do the thing yourself, if you help, this means that the person will not have to do it, and you may be doing it better or faster in a safer way. And sometimes it's even more explicit. Sometimes the helping is about keeping the person safe. So should I let that person go for walks, for example, when they might fall and hurt themselves? Or should I stop them from doing so, in which case they will have less space for their own daily life and their choices in daily life? I find that it often boils down to safety. It boils down to how risk-averse we are and how we see our own responsibility as caregivers. Because you see, if we believe that our responsibility is to make sure that our person is safe, entirely safe, this is incompatible with any freedom at all. We cannot have both complete freedom and complete safety. We have to balance them one against the other. It's not just in caregiving either. This is the reason why we have speed limits on freeways, because if we let people be completely free, safety would drop. But on the other hand, if we make people completely safe, this is the end of any kind of freedom. So one way to resolve this is to rethink our responsibility. It is not up to us to make our person perfectly safe. It is up to us to stand by their side in that stage of their life, whether it be the end of it or not, and make sure that their life is as good as it can be. And a good life has different components, and freedom is one of them. So we are going to have to accept some risk, because without the possibility of risk, there is no freedom. How much risk? That is going to vary, but that's the conversation we ought to be having. How safe do we want to make you? How free do we want to keep you? I distinctly remember having had this very discussion with my aunts and uncles years ago about my then very much aging grandpa. I have a grandpa who lived up to 100.5. And he would take very long trips on a Greyhound bus. He lived in the US. And he would go off on his own to go to his home country. He came from Belize. And at the end, he was frail and he'd have all this luggage with him, and he would rely on the kindness of strangers to help him with his luggage. And at one point, his children, so my mother and my aunts and uncles, started getting worried that they would be called to bring his body back from the middle of nowhere, and should they be letting him take that kind of trip anymore? We had this big discussion, and I was included in it because although I was not in the generation of his children, I was among the generation of his grandchildren who had gone into healthcare. There were several of us, and probably unfairly, the older generation included the youngsters who were healthcare professionals and not the others. With hindsight, they should also have included the others if they were including us. But be that as it may, having this discussion about how much risk is okay in order to obtain what goods in life is the discussion to have. In the end, we decided that the risk was actually okay, that these trips were important enough to my grandpa to let him take that risk and accept the possibility that we may indeed have to go and pick up his body from the middle of nowhere one day, which it turns out we never had to do, because in the end he decided on his own to stop making those trips when he was 98 or 99 years old. Sometimes it's just a question of people not having the same threshold for the risk, but usually there is some risk aversion in everyone. But it is important to realize also that if you're really old, or if you're really sick, or both, you may actually be taking risks in your ordinary life that other people do not realize, and that may change your relationship to risk. If every time you walk up and down the stairs you feel like you're risking your life, someone telling you that an activity will risk your life may be a lot less impressive to you, and you may not fully understand why they're so concerned about that other thing when they don't seem to be concerned about the stairs. If you do want to reduce the risk for someone and you're thinking about limiting their freedom in order to do that, one other thing you might do, therefore, is to check their house for risks that you might be able to diminish without diminishing their freedom. So things like if there are carpets that are mobile, that you can trip over, maybe you need to stick them on the floor. If there are cables that are apparent that you could catch your feet in, maybe you want to put those away. There are handles that you can put in showers or seats you can install in the shower, and so on. Some people will forget the fire on the stove, and you have systems with timer that mean that it will switch itself off after a certain time if no one is attending to it. There are professionals that will do that will go around the house with you and check and see what can be made safer. There are many, many things you can do in an ordinary household to decrease risk in ways that does not diminish freedom, and that might make you feel more reassured that you have done things to make the person safer, and it might make you less motivated to limit their freedom in order to increase their safety, because you've already increased their safety in other ways. But remember that your job is not to make them entirely safe. You will have done your job well if you have helped them to live their own lives as well as possible during that time. It is not up to you to make sure that nothing bad ever happens to them. This is not something that we can do. Yeah.